All right, UFC Fight Night Tampa is now in the books, and this was a relatively stacked fight night, and we did get a little bit of a last-minute switch up in the main event. We were supposed to get Ian Gary versus Joaquin Buckley, but as we all know now, with Belal Muhammad having to pull out of his title fight at UFC 310, and with Ian Gary coming in to take his place, instead we got a much different matchup between Colby Covington and Joaquin Buckley. And with Colby not being around as of late, not taking all that many fights, on top of how just not the same he's looked in his past couple fights, I kind of had a feeling that it was not going to be the best night for him out there. Also put a little bit of money on Buckley. One cool thing we did get to see from Colby was his walkout. I expected him to come out to the Kurt Angle song, which he's been using for the past, 5 years, but instead, this guy walks out with Hulk Hogan and Chael Sonnen right behind him. Me personally, I don't know if I'm reading into it a little too much. I felt like that might have in part been a way for Colby to signify that this may or may not be his last time out, so he kind of wants to go out with a bang. Here we see the tail of the tape, and Colby Covington at 36 years old, now being one of the older guys in the division. That's what gave me pause at first as to whether or not I thought he had all that much of a chance of getting it done in this one. With a cardio heavy style, constantly pushing the pace, the older you get, especially with the more wear and tear on your body, that style is not something you can continue to do all the way into your late 30s. And right from the start of this one, you could see there was a clear difference in punching power. Colby respected Buckley's power enough to get backed up pretty much from the start. And that's saying something, since Colby is notoriously a high pressure fighter, likes to put the other guy on the back foot, and he just wasn't as successful in doing so. I think after a lot of the performances we've seen from Colby, whether it was the back-to-back Usman fights, the Leon Edwards fight, we see that Colby has a good chin, but he is very susceptible to getting rocked because he's always coming forward while not having enough punching power to make the other guy fully respect the pressure that he's applying when he fights guys like Usman, or in this case like Buckley, with crazy knockout power. After Colby started to struggle to get something working on the feet, he tried to implement some wrestling, but Buckley was just too strong, too fast. His reaction time was too fast. Colby wasn't able to just kind of overwhelm Buckley the way that he was previously able to do to a lot of his opponents. From that point forward, Buckley just kind of picked him apart. Beautiful punch selection, hitting the body and the head. Colby threw a lot back in terms of volume, but again, Buckley felt very confident in his ability to walk through most of Colby's shots. Colby was pretty much getting dominated from the start of this fight, getting a giant cut right over his right eye that was going to come back to bite him in the end in this one. Now, Colby was able to get a takedown in this one. He was able to put Buckley down, but unfortunately for him, he was not able to keep Buckley there. Colby in this one having a pretty decent strength disadvantage, and Buckley being a pretty good grappler himself, was able to find his way back to the feet, where from that point forward, it was just more of the same. And each minute that went by, the fight just got worse and worse for Colby. As early as the second round, Colby started looking like his shots were a little more labored. I don't know if it was fatigue physically or mentally or what, but Colby did not look like the same guy that was able to completely dominate Rafael dos Anjos all those years ago. And the third round was for sure the beginning of the end. Buckley's shots were getting more and more precise as the fight went on. He got his range, he got Colby's timing, and it looked like he was on the verge of getting a pretty convincing knockout, if not a TKO, before the ref came in, brought in a doctor, and if you listen closely, what the doctor said was if the fight continues and he takes more damage there, he might lose his eye. And I think this is one of those classic situations where we watch this fight from home, we don't necessarily fully get how serious some of these cuts are, but had this fight gone on longer, even though I know that me and everybody else wanted it to, the guy could have been in some serious trouble. Now, if you're watching this video and you're a Colby Covington fan, I think this fight forced a lot of people who wanted to see Colby make his way back to the top of the division to come to a pretty unfortunate realization that Leon Edwards fight, where Colby looked a step slower than usual, where he was kind of getting tagged over and over, wasn't able to dominate a single facet of the fight, not the striking, not the grappling, and him at the end of this fight saying that it was due to him breaking his foot early on, which I thought was very questionable. I mean, the guy's not exactly known for being the most honest guy in the world. Kind of makes me wonder if that was just, it almost kind of confirms to me that that was just a straight up lie, and that Colby in this fight against Leon Edwards looked older and slower, just like he did in this fight against Buckley, because he is exactly that. He's older and he's slower than he was before. And the guy just might not have that same endless cardio that he once had. And on top of that, a lot of the fighters at the top end of the welterweight division these days are a lot more well-rounded than they were even just 5, 6, 7 years ago. Even just pulling up Colby Covington's record right here, we see he had that win against Dong Young Kim, a guy who did not fight again after this, against Damian Maia, against Rafael dos Anjos, Robbie Lawler. This was the last time Colby was on a streak of winning. And let's call it what it is. All these guys were older. They weren't at their best athletically, and Colby has a style that was kind of perfect to take advantage of that. But then we see when he goes up against Kamaru Usman, a guy who is very similar in age to him, who's also decently well-rounded, can wrestle, can strike, and has good cardio, he got stopped. We see he was able to bounce back with a win over Tyron Woodley, but as we all know now, that was the beginning of the end for Woodley. Woodley went on to not win another fight again. I think he went on a 5-fight losing streak in the UFC and then lost back-to-back fights against Jake Paul, right? So a rematch against Kamaru Usman where Colby lost again. He didn't get finished this time. He was close to, I believe, in the second round where he got knocked down twice, but Colby, to his credit, was able to survive and grind his way to a decision in a fight that was pretty competitive. And then we see the win over George Masvidal, one of the more infamously disappointing fights. Yeah, that one was just peak wet blanket, just kind of holding on to him. Colby always had the wrestling advantage against Masvidal, and again, as we know now, Masvidal at this point in time was on the start of what would be a decently steep decline in terms of his athleticism, which brings us to here, the back-to-back losses against Leon Edwards and Joaquin Buckley. And make no mistake, I mean, Colby does have an impressive resume. The guy at one point in time went on a 6-fight win streak, and in the midst of that became the interim welterweight champion of the world. But only 2 of those fights in that winning streak, Colby was able to win by finish. His most recent finish coming a little over 4 years ago against Tyron Woodley, in a fight where Tyron Woodley ended up breaking his rib. So it wasn't exactly the talent and skill of Colby that was able to perfectly time a knockout or slide his way into a submission on the ground. So when you take all this into account, it's really hard to know what makes sense for Colby Covington next. When you take a look at the rankings, Colby was previously, going into this fight, ranked number 6 in the world, with Buckley being number 9. I imagine Buckley's going to jump up and take Colby's spot at 6th. Buckley in his post-fight interview doing something pretty unique, actually, saying that he's going to choose his next opponent based on how much noise the crowd makes for each opponent that he lists. It looks like, based on the crowd's reaction and based on what Buckley was saying, that Buckley versus Usman fight could be very interesting. Buckley wants to be the legend killer, and if he's able to put up this kind of performance against Colby Covington, Kamaru, who doesn't fight exactly like Colby but has some shades, some similarities, I am actually interested if Buckley's takedown defense is able to hold up against someone like Usman, who was able to out-grapple Colby when they fought, and someone who has significantly more punching power and a significantly longer reach. So that could be a very fun fight. But as far as it goes for Colby, I don't have any idea. The Ian Gary fight would have made perfect sense before this, but there's really no way around it. Colby just kind of straight up ducked that fight. So now I think Colby Covington versus Gilbert Burns can make a lot of sense. Gilbert's a guy who is also up there in age, recently lost to Jack Della Maddalena. I think that could be a very interesting, fun fight. We all know Gilbert has some crazy knockout power and some extremely high level jiu-jitsu. We all remember when Hamzat didn't even really want to engage all that much on the ground against Gilbert. And I know Colby wants that Wonder Boy fight, but I don't think anybody wants to watch Wonder Boy get the wet blanket treatment ever again. Let's just keep Wonder Boy to fun, striking heavy matchups. And it's my understanding that Colby actually does make a pretty good paycheck every time he steps inside the octagon. The guy's clearly in Dana's good graces. So I'm sure if for no reason other than, the money alone, he's gonna want to fight again. But if this one wasn't his last, I can't imagine there's more than 1 or 2 left. And realistically, I think if he goes out there and suffers another loss, then that is probably the end of Colby Covington in the UFC. Let me know in the comments below, what do you guys think? What did you guys think about this fight? Who do you think that both of these guys should fight next? And yeah, thanks for watching.